You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Keshia. Welcome everyone to the Road to Wisdom podcast. Today we have the incredible Rhea Dempsey come join us to talk all about birth, which I feel like we say this often when we have guests, but it's very convenient for us at the moment because we will be going into that space again. And I think talking positively about birth and trusting your body and your baby is the best thing you can do when you're pregnant. So we're very lucky to have you today, Rhea. I'll give you a brief introduction. So Rhea is the author of 2 books, Birth with Confidence and Beyond the Birth Plan. I've read Birth with Confidence. It's fantastic. I haven't got to Beyond the Birth Plan yet, but I've listened to you talk. We were talking earlier about the podcast you've done that you haven't listened to, but I've listened to them, so they were great. And now you do birth education and
everything about birth.
Everything about birth. Yeah,
I do,
like conferences and things like that.
So maybe I'll just say, in terms of now, I used to do births, of course, lots and lots of over many, many years. I don't know, nearly 2000, I think. Can you imagine?
Wow.
How glorious it is to have that sort of energy, be exposed to that sort of energy and do all that and all those kids. And now lots of those babies whose births I was at are having babies. And so I'm a grandmother myself, virtually with my own family, and also somehow or other energetically grandmother to lots of babies coming in. It's pretty brilliant. I don't do births now, apart from the ones that I absolutely can't refuse, which is my own grandchildren. And I've just had that privilege of being at each of the births of the children in my extended family in that next generation. So that's pretty yummy to imagine being that sort of lineage of family life. But not really doing births, but, writing those books, that was my labour of love in big ways. And I do actually now far too much birth debriefing, far too much. And I mean, it's necessary and important, but it breaks my heart, but it fires my passion. So that childbirth educator in me is as passionate now, probably more so than way back when I started, because things are getting worse and worse and worse for certainly that situation about normal physiological childbirth. And so I'm pretty passionate in the whole thing.
Yeah, which is really incredible considering, like, listening to your birth story, and which is, I guess, where you started your entire journey into the birth world. But I actually I found so many similarities with my own first birth. I mean, I was quite lucky in the way that I didn't have intervention when I was in labour, but when you spoke about your baby being taken off you at the beginning, and I had that happen to me, and I'm like, how are they still doing that? And it's wild because the things that you experienced that sent you on this trajectory are not just still happening, but worse is happening now to women in the hospital system. And it's just blows my mind, like how it's gotten significantly worse. And then, it's just, I mean, we'll go into it, but you start seeing women running running to the hills from the hospital system now when they're pregnant. And then that comes with a whole lot of judgment too, which is wild when you're like, okay, you can have this terrible option, but if you do anything else, you're going to get all this judgment and criticism, and I mean, you'll get cancelled in some situations as well. So I really appreciate your book because it does, I would imagine so many women can relate to your experience even today. And it does make us all feel a lot less alone in how we managed our first births. But then also you give such a beautiful example of what is possible and what we need to know and what is necessary and how we need to be held in that birthing space. So thank you, firstly.
Very, very happy, very happy. Yes.
Yeah. But I'd love, like, one of the things that really hit home for me, which I feel like doesn't get discussed nearly enough, was your term labour bypassing.
Yeah.
Which I think also flows on to so many different aspects of life. But I'd love for you to explain to our viewers what labour bypassing is and how that's affecting us today.
Yeah. So this is, there's something good about getting old and having a broader perspective or a longer timeline of perspective, because it's 45 years or something now that I've been in the birth scene, and I'm going to sort of go round about a few things to come to directly to the question. But one of the key things that I now understand is so important to be able to speak to is that I was involved in birth before epidurals came in, or as possibly you've heard me say many, many times, the fucking epidural came in. And
valid.
That has shaped so many different aspects. Also, I was involved in the birth scene really when, births was happening in hospital. The home birth scene then was we were the renegades. But in the hospital scene, still pretty much there was disturbance, and they were taking the babies were taken to the nursery and so on. And certainly my own first birth story in England speaks to the fact that there were interventions, but not nearly to the rate that we have them now. And one of the key factors has been the epidural that has made that social change as well as practice change. And so then I started to see that happening more and more. And so at a social level, just starting to feel like, okay, well now with what's happening in the birth scene, firstly, the use of synthetic oxytocin all the time for the induction or the speeding up, augmentation, or of course the Caesar rate now through the roof. So, and then the epidural, which, it's such a seductive thing, so seductive, but many, many women don't understand the consequences of that seduction. And so with all of that, then I started to see that at a social and cultural level, shifting from when I first started, and I started to call it the labour bypass era, so that if women want to now, okay, just before I say that, you, me, all of us who work in the birth scene know that all of these interventions have their place. They are absolutely brilliant. They are useful to some mums, some babies. We're privileged to live in a country where we can access them when we need them, because there are many, many women around the world who need these interventions and can't access them. So I'm not having a go at the interventions per se. Mm-hmm. They all have their place and brilliant. However, they've slipped out of the bounds of what we might call medical need and have shifted into the realm of social choice, and not only social choice, but now social expectation. So this is what I call the labour bypass era, which is that if women want to, and, we can, they can, but many of them don't know the consequences. Mm. So if they want to, they don't have to labour. They can have the elective Caesar. Yeah, they don't have to labour. Or if they want to labour, they can have it. It can happen at a time which is sort of to their choosing. I'll talk about the system in a little while, but I'm just thinking in terms of, women's choices now in this, what I'm calling this labour bypass era.
Mm-hmm.
They could have their baby induced to be more convenient. They could, of course, then if they're labouring, they can have the epidural and not have to engage. So they can play Angry Birds or watch their favourite telly program. Or
my mum read Vogue while she pushed me out.
So in terms of that thing about labour bypass, focusing on the word labour, the work of surrendering, the work of working with those contractions, working with that functional physiological pain, working with your body, working with your baby. So when I say labour, I'm using it from that point of view, which is what we say women are labouring when they're birthing. Well, now in present birth culture, don't have to. Babies can do it, but then there are big consequences about that.
And I feel like where women are choosing these very seductive options of not having to feel pain, not having to work. I mean, the number of people who are told, don't be a hero, just take the pain meds. Why would you want to put yourself through that?
Yep.
When you go for, like, women who are going for those options are not being told the risks, the side effects, and the flow-on effects of when you choose these interventions, when you choose these pain mediators or whatever you want to call it. And I feel like, so, yes, women can choose it, but it's still not informed consent when they're doing these things, which is just something that boggles my mind. And I mean, over the last few years, I guess informed consent became a very shady topic.
What even is it? I don't even think it's a thing anymore.
But yeah, that I mean, I remember attending my first birth classes. They were the hospital birth classes. And for the most part, people were asking about the cocktail of drugs they can use, like how they can make it easier, how they can reduce any pain. They don't want to, they didn't want to have to work. And I just feel like one of the things that we really need to be educating women about, children about, is that life is work. Like, you don't just get the shiny prize at the end having done nothing. And I think if you go for that method of, like, anything in life, but birth being one of the biggest, you're going to suffer some real consequences.
Well, it's initiation, right? And it comes in stages. Like, your baby is born, it's hard. It's not physically easy. And then when your baby's 6 weeks old and they wake up, it's hard. And then when they're 6 months, they get their first tooth, and that's hard. And then when they're 2, they might get a testosterone boost, and that is freaking hard. You can't bypass through the hard. And I feel like birth is the first one.
Yeah.
Pregnancy, if you have a hard pregnancy, that could be hard too, but you can't, you have to get through it.
Yeah. And you do. You have to endure it, and you have to learn.
And I feel like there's something to be said about becoming better and leveling up as a woman, as a parent. Every time you overcome the hard, you can't just say, I'm not doing it. It's same in marriage. Like, it's hard. You have to still do it. You can't just tap out and think that you're going to have a good outcome.
Yeah. Well, also, I think there's something about, for me as an educator, educating about, well, why is it worth doing the hard? What are you missing out if you don't do the hard? And the epidural is a key part about that. So this is what I mean in terms of being around before epidurals came in. And I often, when I'm talking about this, feel like I need to sort of beg forgiveness of all the women having babies since that point, because when they first came in, those of us working, particularly I was in the home birth scene, but also more generally in what we called natural birth at that point, and birth centres. We had in Melbourne a number of birth centres. So women who were wanting natural birth, when we heard about epidurals, we were thinking, they're going to be, what a brilliant thing. That is going to be brilliant for what we could see, small numbers of women where things were really not going well in the labour, maybe in a very difficult position or something, and that the epidural could just really be so magic for that sort of small number of birth situations that could benefit from that intervention. Little did we know, and this is what I feel like I have to apologise for, to not have had the foresight to understand that, in fact, what would happen with the epidural was that it would just hijack the whole show. So that's what's happened now. And so women coming to have their babies now, and this is probably at least the last 10 years, maybe even 15, the epidural is in everybody's mindset. So it not only in the women coming to their births, but their partners. Not only that, but it's also, unfortunately, certainly in the mindset of the medical obstetric teams and what have you, and the anaesthetists and what have you, but sadly, it is also in the mind of so many of the midwives that the epidural exists as a seductress, as a temptation, if not, that's one step away from it, is to be at least tempted by it, but mainly it's just really wholly embraced that this is the way to go, this is the way to do it. And of course it does, it's obviously that seduction is very strong, but what we know is that it entirely hijacks the birth. And this is part of women are feeling like it's a gift to them without really understanding what it then means. And I talk now a lot about the thank goodness birth. Yep. So women are hearing, pregnant women, they tell me, and I know this is happening, is that they're hearing also, when they say they're pregnant, and then they're going to get all their friends and family around them and tell them birth stories. And that one of the huge birth stories that gets told is the thank goodness birth. Particularly if they're saying they're going to have a home birth or what have you. Oh, well, thank goodness I was in that hospital and they could save the baby and they could do this and they could do that and they could do that. And then they had to do this and blah, 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 that whole litany of the thank goodness. And occasionally, very, very occasionally, maybe that's fully true. Yeah? And thank goodness, yes. But in most cases, so what I tell the women and partners that I'm educating or who will listen to me in any way, shape or form, is that if you ever hear a thank goodness story, you need to just gently try and unpack that story, and nearly always you will find the start of that whole thank goodness journey is the epidural. And if you know they've had an epidural, then just step back and take that on board instead of, because I think when newly pregnant women are hearing these thank goodness stories over and over and over and over again, it must terrify them. How often, unless they're embedded in a very small sort of network who are savvy and who are making choices and having those much more straightforward births, hard though they are, the hard work of it, but hearing these thank goodness stories all the time, then without really understanding and pulling that apart, then it must be just terrifying and build more and more fear about that birth doesn't work, or women's bodies don't work, or babies don't know what they're doing, or whatever. So then they're, of course, running much more adrenaline in their bodies and so on, and just freaking out about birth before they're even in it. So I give that advice, and I would to any of your listeners, that if you're hearing about a thank goodness birth, just gently try and get a little bit under the story and find out what were the choices that the woman made. Certainly was an epidural involved, and then pretty much you can understand that cascade is really out of those sort of choices, and taking that on board for yourself to understand, no, there's not about birth itself not being trustworthy or not working. It's about what we're doing about it. It's about the social and cultural context now, about this labour bypass era that you shouldn't have to, you poor thing. The pitying of labouring women, the demonising of labour pain. This is the other thing that the epidural has done. Demonising labour pain, whereas once, I'm sure forever, that intensity of a labour was seen as exactly as you were saying, Chloe, that sort of rite of passage, that aspect of, moving through something that is transformative and something that is demanding, and both physically, emotionally. And I mean, we want to be strengthened. It's a tough gig giving birth to our babies, but it's an even tougher gig being, mother, father, parent to these babies. So that tempering that comes through that tough gig, so pain and all, that's part of the journey, and understanding that and making the choices that will enable that is one thing. But this demonizing of the pain now means that we're pitying labouring women for having to do it, and then of course we're wanting to take away that pain, and the epidural can do it, but at great cost, because we know that once the epidural goes in, maybe we're going to come back around to talk about oxytocin a little bit more later, but just to say this as I'm on the roll with this fucking epidural. So once an epidural goes in, it starts to play around with the hormones, and really then, before I say this, I've got to say something else. I want to frame, you can do the editing later. We need to frame the difference between what I call queen oxytocin and synthetic oxytocin. I think that women and their partners coming into the birth scene, or had their babies or what have you, everybody's familiar with this idea now, I think, of oxytocin. And the word oxytocin is used willy-nilly here and there, but we need to understand there's quite a difference between what I'm saying is queen oxytocin, which is the oxytocin which is coming out of the mother's body, and also the baby's body, and actually anybody who else is in the birth scene, who, if they're attuned and in that sort of surrendered state to be able to be present in that way. So queen oxytocin, a multitasking, glorious hormone. It's not only in the birth scene, it's across life, but queen oxytocin, in the context of the birth, is multitasking. Yes, driving the contractions, but also, so that means opening the mother's body, but also queen oxytocin crosses the blood-brain barrier and is opening the mother's heart and having her ready to fall in love with her baby, and the bonding, and the baby as well. The baby's own oxytocin systems are working to drive it towards that opening and readiness to bond. So we want that juicy, juicy, juicy stuff. The other thing about queen oxytocin, and this is why I did births for so long, because really pretty well anybody, particularly if you're in the normal birth scene, they're oxytocin junkies, yeah? You can hang out in that vibe, because oxytocin, queen oxytocin, naturally occurring oxytocin, is in the environment, it's coming from the mother's body. It's like a pheromone, so it's there. We're all falling in love. I know some young people probably go to raves or something have that vibe somehow. But in the birth room, you can have it when queen oxytocin is doing her work, and that mum is doing her work. So queen oxytocin, yes, we want that, multitasking, opens the mother's body, prepares the baby for birth, and then prepares the two of them for falling in love, and everybody else in that space who is also connected with that loving vibe through the sort of pheromone effect, if you like. We're all falling in love, and I think that's probably how it has always been in the village.
Mm-hmm.
The baby is welcomed into not just the mother's arms, but into a wider circle of people who are bonded to that baby. These human babies, they're pretty dependent on people to care for them for quite some time. So queen oxytocin, that's how it is sort of, I guess, supposed to be. And for me, I've been lucky enough to be around that over and over and over and over again, just live in that vibe. However, we have synthetic oxytocin. Yep. A lot of people, as I say, don't make this differential. And synthetic oxytocin, apparently the chemical makeup of the synthetic form, as well as the organic, if you like, or the queen oxytocin that I'm talking about, the chemical makeup is pretty much the same, but something about the delivery system in the body is different. Queen oxytocin, yes, through the body and also into the brain. So this is that thing about opening the thoughts and feelings in the heart for the bonding. Synthetic oxytocin, all it does is drive contractions and open the body. So we're not getting that heart engagement.
Would we call it opening the body? Because I do feel like the synthetic oxytocin is often when you'll hear about tearing and like a number of other issues that happen in those births. And I'm just going off instinct here, but it feels like it doesn't really open the body so much as just force the contractions and force that body open. So it
does.
Interesting.
And that's an important part of language to use in that. But when it's forced, I mean, oxytocin opens the body too. Queen oxytocin does, but yes, it's forced. And not only that, it's the way it drives the contraction, but also the sort of procedures around it also. Because once synthetic oxytocin is up driving those contractions, there's a whole timeline set of things that come into place that then put a whole lot of pressures on other aspects of how long you can do this part and that part and the other thing. Yep. But also, if it's synthetic oxytocin, it's not crossing the blood-brain barrier. It's not connecting out into the network of people around. So that whole love vibe is not part of that story. I mean, at a hormonal level, I mean, as creative human beings, we can overcome that. We can use our mind to, fall in love with those babies and what have you. But evolution would really have it that Queen oxytocin is doing that, and then the rest of us follows along. That instinct to be there, to fall in love and to take care of that baby, which comes out of that hormonal mix, is there. And then the practices that follow. We can overstep that. And I mean, darling Sarah Buckley, who's done all that brilliant work on hormones and continuing to do in her PhD. So she is talking about now, given that this labour bypass is so entrenched and that synthetic oxytocin is driving so many of the labours. I'll come back to the link with epidural in a moment. But she's talking about, and certainly in the hospitals, they're now talking about this thing about filling the gap, filling the hormonal gaps. Yeah? So if we're using synthetic oxytocin, and synthetic oxytocin links so strongly with epidural, what we then have to start, and that those numbers are so strong. I'm going to lay out some numbers in a minute just to let listeners know that, okay, we maybe know how much are we going to pull this back and how quickly. And so what we need to be also thinking about is if we're missing out on these key hormonal drivers that have been part of our evolutionary history and have worked for so long until we're now interfering with them so strongly, how do we try and play catch up with that in terms of filling those hormonal gaps? And some of the emphasis now is on that golden hour after birth of making sure that however the baby's born, that skin to skin happens, and that we're encouraging that first hour of connection between the mother and baby to try and rejig, or maybe that's not quite the word, but sort of tap into some of the instinctive and hormonal things that have been missed out on because of the way the birth has gone. So maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I just want to finish a few things about that epidural. So the epidural, once it's in, then it blunts somehow or other the queen oxytocin system. So then we have to put up synthetic oxytocin, and then that changes the nature of what's happening in the mother. It certainly takes the functional physiological pain of the labour away. And so then when that labour bypass, it's like the mother she doesn't necessarily have to stay engaged with what's actually happening. And I hear those stories, of then just watch telly with your partner, or I sort of half jokingly say, oh, you could just play Angry Birds through the rest of the labour. Or it's like there's a disengagement that happens, and that's happening at a hormonal level, though many women don't understand that. And that then it's more likely, certainly we have to put the synthetic hormone oxytocin drip up, which then generally will lead to a forceps or vacuum birth, or many babies do not like this cocktail of the hormones and the epidural drugs, and of course start to complain, and so then we go to the Caesar. So that cascade of interventions that then women are often talking about this thank goodness birth. Well, thank goodness, the baby's heartbeat went low, and thank goodness they could save the baby when we did the Caesar and so on, without fully understanding that pretty much most of that cascade in the general population has been triggered by that epidural. And the epidural is sold as a gift to women. Poor things, pity them, having to do that work, all that pain, but at then great cost to what is actually then happening to the birth and the baby and the mother's body, and the trauma that comes when, particularly if women then start to unpack that and work out what's happened and start to see that somehow or other they were, in moments of what I call, if you've read my first book, that those crises of confidence, where it's getting tough, it's hard, the contractions are strong, the functional physiological pain, and starting to really feel like you need some really good solid support, or that it's too much for you, and the cultural message is, you poor thing, you shouldn't have to do it anymore, and we can save you and we can make it okay. And then they fall into that weakened position of not being supported to keep working with the contractions, to some good eye-to-eye contact, some breathing with, some encouraging different positions, or all of those things that can help women to move through those crises of confidence. Instead, at that point, the epidural comes in, and then that whole cascade of interventions happens. And maybe even in the early time after the birth, they just feel like, oh, well, this is, my body doesn't work, or my baby was imperiled or something or other, and they can take that on board at face value. But often later, as they unpack, they feel that sort of larger sort of cultural betrayal, or maybe betrayal's too strong in the moment, but feeling let down or abandoned in that distress of working with those stronger contractions. Maybe I would say that they've had an archetypal expectation that there will be somebody there to meet them when they're in those strong contractions, those midwives, those grandmothers, those mothers, those who've been there before, to meet them, eye-to-eye contact. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you can do it. Yes, let's keep going. But I think there's a deep archetypal betrayal there. But certainly at the social and cultural level, I think that women, as they start to unpack this, start to feel there's a betrayal too about the system that they took on board and made their choices about, as culturally we tell them that they should, has let them down at crucial moments that then has set off this cascade. There's a lot
I think a lot of our listeners have probably had one of those birth experiences that have really catapulted them into going from, some of our guests even have had those types of thank God births, and then, had subsequent pregnancies and births, and then, led them to having beautiful free births and, those incredibly healing births. And what I would love is to encourage that empowered birth at home for our listeners who are just, they're never going to walk into a hospital, because most of our listeners are beyond that. Yeah. But really turning it around and encouraging and empowering these women and partners of these women to go into birth at home, either with a doula, with a midwife, or themselves, and just have that, restored complete trust and faith in their bodies and their babies.
And every part of their bodies, like that hormone response that is there for a reason. Like the reason we labor is there, like because it leads to the bonding, it leads to the release of breast milk, it leads to the entire group of people who are there. And whether that's just you, your partner and your children, or midwives or close friends or family all falling in love with that baby to look after that baby. The love is there.
Yeah.
It's so like every single aspect of laboring, of being like going through that. And I mean, for some people it's a walk in the park. I mean, and I've experienced both, where it's been like a 26-hour slog to 3 hours of like I didn't even know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and you know, so births do all look different, but
I think the
to
problem
be
is,
prepared
I think the problem is we've just had this, we're so overexposed to the shit. We're so overexposed to the trauma. We're so overexposed to, oh, but birth is dangerous, or babies can die. You can die.
They just die all the time.
You know, all of these things can happen. Like, why would you be so stupid to birth at home? It just seems so dangerous. Like, why would you not just cancel out that risk? But from my perspective, and I know yours, Keshia, and I know yours, Rhea, if you put your foot into a hospital, you are way more likely to end up being treated with all of these interventions and leaving that hospital feeling completely bruised and battered. And
even if you walk out of the hospital with your oxytocin high still, and you could probably speak to this more than I can, Rhea, but you know, 6 months down the track, a year down the track, when breastfeeding hasn't gone right, when you've got postnatal depression, when you haven't been able to bond with your baby properly, when, you know, whatever range of issues have come up for you, then you start thinking about, you know, often you'll get asked, oh, did you have a forceps delivery? Or did you have syntocin or synthetic oxytocin? And you'll start to piece together and be like, oh, hang on, wait, yeah. Actually, when that nurse told me that I was being too loud while I was laboring, that actually did make me feel like I needed to numb the pain a bit. Or, you know, and all of a sudden your birth that, and God, I've listened to so many birth stories, and especially in hospital, and you hear it every time, like women who are just like, I had such a good birth in hospital, but then they list all these things, and in their mind, they're still like, oh, but it was so good. But I'm like, that lady, give her a bit more time, and she's going to start linking the reason why she had postnatal depression, like why she, like all these issues came up from her afterwards. And then that's going to manifest as trauma. And then when you fall pregnant again is generally when you kind of switch on to, oh, I don't want postnatal depression again. You start looking into what causes that, or, you know, and that might lead you down the track. So
yeah,
I took that off.
No, what I really want to do is just, I really want to speak to the person who's ready for a home birth or thinks they're ready. They may have had a traumatic birth and they want to feel empowered. They want to just allow their body, they want a physiological birth. And, you know, we're lucky enough to have had, it's been a journey from my first to now. And, you know, I always thought I had a great first birth, but there was intervention. I had my waters, and my membrane, what do you call it? Stretch and sweep, because I was 42 weeks. But my midwife, you know, at the same time was like, there's no relief for you. Like, you're just going to do this. So there was there was nothing on the table. There was no epidural. There was there was nothing. Like, that was just, I mean, she was a home birth midwife, but I did have my baby in the birthing centre. But I was very lucky to have a midwife who was like, you're not having anything. You're just going to do this. Suck it up. But I will break your membranes. So, yeah, I kind of would love to just, you know, really speak to that person who's maybe holding some fear but ready. You know, like there's an urge just coming through that wants to have their baby at home, with or without support from a professional, but is still feeling maybe the pulls of the fear a little bit.
First thing I need to say is really I'm not across the free birth scene. When I talk about home birth, it's really with midwives and with that medical overview. So, but still, yes, some of the same issues. So, first of all, that thing of exactly as you say, you're just trying to unpack if and often I would think that they've already had a baby before, and maybe it's been a hospital birth, and then they're starting to unpack these things. That's important for them to do that. Secondly, still to understand aspects about the hormones. Yeah. So separate to birth, although all these things play. But I mean, generally we're all living busy lives, even through pregnancy. And so one of the things that I encourage the women who do my workshops and things to really have a sense of in that certainly the last 2 months or so of the pregnancy is, are they able to follow their body's demands in terms of when to eat, when to sleep, when to rest, when to be active, so just being attuned to and following their pregnant body, following their baby that's in their body, and following that rhythm of their bodies. So that, if they're able to do that, mainly, then that's more, this is simplistic, but this is more than the oxytocin system. Yeah. Because they're in tune with their body, they're following their body, they're in the surrender to what's happening with their body in as much as they can in their lifestyle. And that will be preparing them for that surrender for the birth. And that's all part of oxytocin. It's more complex than that, but we'll just talk about it in a simple formula. So whenever I'm doing workshops and things, I ask women that, and pretty well all of them, very few women can put their hand up and say, yeah, I can follow my body in late pregnancy. I can follow the attunement of what my body needs, what my baby needs. Mostly, then the opposite to that is that you're on the clock. That you have to get up at this point to be able to do this, to do that, to do the other. You can only eat at this point when it's your lunch break, or this or that or the other. And so that they're following what a clock is saying or what the day requires. And that then means that they're going to be more in their adrenaline system. So that those stresses are there. And for women then to come to be ready to surrender to the birth and to be surrendering to their baby, and i.e. more in their oxytocin system, but if they haven't dropped into that because of their lifestyle, because of demands and pressures, or because of just lack of awareness, modern life, social life, to be busy rather than to be starting to slow down and tune in, then that can be playing in whether then they go into, if they're going to go into labour or they go overdue or so on, or sometimes their body systems get so stressed that in fact they go into labour a bit earlier than would be wise, and things like that. So that thing of how their lifestyle is, how they're supported to be able to really surrender, to stay attuned to their bodies in late pregnancy, this is part of that oxytocin system. So that's one thing. And of course that requires lots of support. Requires lots of support at the personal level, but it also requires understanding and support at a cultural and social level. And I don't think we've got that anymore for they're expected to just, be busy doing this and this, and then somehow or other we just have the baby and get the baby out and then get back to whatever that busyness was. Well, we know that is not actually how it has been, should be, and so on. So that plays into the oxytocin system, queen oxytocin system, very important for women to understand that.
I do love actually, Rhea, that I think it's early on in Birth with Confidence, you do talk to people who are really keen, whether it's first or subsequent births, to have a natural birth and to have a physiological birth. And you ask the questions like, have you trusted your intuition before? And have you, I think I'm paraphrasing here, so might not be exactly these words, but it was very much asking questions like, have you done hard things and overcome them? Like, do you challenge yourself? Do you trust your intuition? Do you follow that? Or are you governed by what's around you and what other people think and say and feel? And I think that's a really important thing. I think even, in pregnancy or preconception to consider if you're going into birth as well, because if you, every time you have a headache, take a Panadol and push on, rather than, okay, I'm listening to my body, I've got a headache, what do I need? I need hydration and rest. Or if you're, any form of numbing, like if you go to a gym class and when it gets too hard, you lay down rather than
what's
push
wrong with
through a
that?
bit. Look, and sometimes it's the right thing to do. Never being able to challenge yourself or accomplish, find those small accomplishments in life that will all translate. And I really liked that concept, because it switches your mindset from just, I want a physiological birth. And I loved that you used that rebellious teen energy, opposed to coming from a more grounded place, because I've definitely entered into many things in both ways, and I had never recognized it in myself until I read that. But yeah, rather than coming at it from that rebellious teen energy where I'm against the system and I'm not going to do this, it needs to really come from a deeper place that is more, okay, I need to if I've not been using my intuition, I need to retrain that up, and I need to start listening to my gut, and I need to start listening to my body and the signs and signals. And I remember in my first pregnancy, I actually stopped taking Panadol. I refused to take Panadol, even though that was my go-to prior to pregnancy.
Yes.
As soon as I found out I was pregnant, I was like, I'm not taking any Panadol. Because I was like, one, I had a little bit of fear around any kind of medications after learning about, is it formaldehyde? Formaldehyde, that the anti-nausea drug that went around. And I was like, well, what could that do? I don't know, that might have been a bit irrational, but I was also like, I don't want to have medications. I don't like feeling numb ever in the birth. And I'm like, I got to start now, not numbing out. So I really like that. I just wanted to bring some attention to that as well, because it is one of those things that you can start preconception or during your pregnancy, starting to build back that trust in your body, that like connection to your body. Because even if you're busy, you're still going to get signs. Like your body's still going to tell you things, and whether you can lay down or not, coming from two mums who have 4 kids already, and sometimes it's not possible to lay down, I can still recognize when I need to lay down and note it and be like, okay, my body needs rest. I may not be able to give it right now, but I know I need it at least. I'm not numbing out to it. So little things like that. Anyway, I'll let you continue.
Yes. I think also sort of adding on to that, 2 other things that I would say, speaking to, well, maybe it's your audience, that I think it's a gift to you and your baby to spend time, and I'm sort of taking another step from what you're saying too, to spend time really becoming habituated to some form of relaxation music, some form of, it might be your own mantra, it might be a specific relaxation practice, or it may be something that is just your own, or it may be that you sit out in your beautiful spot in your garden and just watch the leaf, whatever it is that calming. I think it's always good to have it linked to some sort of music, whatever sort of music that is, and that women in that, hopefully they're doing it in their lives anyway, as part of just general care, but certainly in late pregnancy, to do that really regularly as a deliberate practice. And if it's linked to music, then of course it means that the mother is becoming habituated to that particular music, and also their baby is becoming habituated to that music, because we know, babies, their hearing is complete by about 7 months, 6.5, 7 months. And so this is a great tool for late pregnancy. It's a great tool for labour. It's a great tool for once the baby's born and soothing the baby if the baby's unsettled, that there's that whole thing of a set of practices about mental, emotional, body, as well as the auditory with the music as being a trigger. And certainly for partners at birth and whatever, they need to know what this music is, and they need to know, that when they switch it on, if a crisis of confidence is happening or what have you, then to put that music on, and that can just help. But the work has to be put in beforehand to become habituated to that. And it's a great gift to those kids. I know that my grandchildren, there's particular music that their mums were using in their pregnancies that are still, when they're 8 and 9, if they're getting a bit hairy, then that can be very useful. So that's one little trick that I would say. Maybe it's not a little trick, it's a life hack. I think that's what life hack. A birth, life, parenting hack. So that's one thing I would say. Another thing in all of that I would say is so that's working on the physiology, and the thing about tuning as much as they can in late pregnancy to, are they in their oxytocin system, the relaxation system, the thing of following their body and tuning to their body and following it in as much as they can, or are they in their stress systems, and that's not going to be helpful in terms of the labour or going into labour, and also the labour continuing, and also the pain levels in labour, that following all of those things. The other thing I think, and maybe like if women are living quite active lifestyles, then probably the positioning of the baby in the body is going to just happen. And I guess for many, many of us, if we think back when women's lives were probably much more physical, and that they were shifting and walking and moving and digging and lifting and carrying and what have you, and there's a whole range of physical movement that they were doing that during the pregnancy as well, and that the baby was aligning itself to all of those actions in the mother's body, and so babies would be generally a bit better aligned for the birth. But of course, one of the things that's happening now is that many, many women are living very sedentary lives, many of us, and perhaps even all the way through pregnancy. And so there's that sort of aspect in the body where the mother is not shifting and moving so much, but more just sitting as, well, you two got your legs up and got your pelvis open, so good. I'm just sitting, with my legs crossed in the very office-based work sitting, and which is what lots of women are doing during pregnancy. And so then we're getting many more misaligned babies, and so babies not being in great positions. This makes for a much harder labour, generally a much more painful labour, particularly if that baby's around in that posterior position, which they are more likely to go into with those sort of slouched positions. If you're sedentary in terms of sitting office type, and then come home and sort of lay back on the sofa and slouching back, of course, this encourages that baby into that posterior position, and then we know we've got a very tough labour, and tough labour for babies as well. So I think that you've probably both heard of spinning babies coming out of America, and they, I think, have tapped some of this to really try and have women understand that what used to be way back in our prehistory, where women were much more active during late pregnancy and the baby would be more aligned, now many of our lifestyles don't facilitate that, and that women need to be much more conscious about what they're doing, and that I think spinning babies have really tapped into that pretty strongly and quite well in terms of what they call, I think, the daily essentials in terms of some physical movement, and if they do have to be sitting at desks and whatever, then to modify it like this, that, and the other way to encourage that baby into that brilliant position. So this is a gift to the mother and the baby, because it's a harder slog for the babies if babies are not in great position, and it's certainly a harder slog for the mother. And so that's another thing I think to be attuned to.
What I know you've witnessed literally thousands of births in your career. When you witness women have these things, like they've got the fundamentals in place and they live in a certain way, they're very connected to their bodies, they're very connected to their babies, their intuition, and really trust the physiological process of birth. how often, I know this is a big question, but I feel like it's an inspiring thing for me to hear, especially if I'm about to give birth. But we've obviously read the studies where home is the safest place to give birth majority of the time. But how many times does this go wrong? Like, if you got all the fundamentals in place, is it likely, or in your career, has it kind of how am I trying to say this? Would you say that like majority of the outcomes are usually always positive when the woman has all the fundamentals in place?
Yeah. And do the work, and are prepared to do the work. And of course, need to have people around who also are not bringing a whole lot of fear into that situation, not freaking out, and not laying their thing on the mother's story. And that requires, the other thing to think about is, the partners. And if the partners are the fathers of the baby, which is predominantly how it is, what do they know about birth? What do they know about birth? If women are relying on a partner who has not felt this, has not given birth before, they've been born before, but what has been their birth imprint from their own births? And so then, we have that thing about the partners freaking out, about seeing this intensity and seeing this potency.
Yeah. And that's something that we've discussed before. Just, we've said it a few times, how during pregnancy and especially during birth, like, you're so vulnerable, and it is so important to make sure that, like, I would say it needs to start in pregnancy. You're keeping your, like, field safe from negativity, from other people's stories, and even from people who hold negative stories. And I would extend that to your partner, where I guess education comes in really, really important. So, natural birth courses, so that they can wrap their head around the natural process and how this is actually genetically what we are made to do, and how it's meant to unfold, and the pain and intensity and any part of it is actually how we're designed to be able to process a birth, and then that continues on into the life of the mother and the child. Which I think is an important takeaway. But we
but I think it's also because my partner has recently just said, like, whatever birth you want, whatever the environment, whoever you want, obviously I support that. But as a man, my mind is, how am I going to protect you, and what do I do worst case scenario? And there's nothing that a woman or a mother can do that's going to change how they approach the scene. Like, their job is to do that. So I feel like
probably inviting someone into the birth space that holds a real reverence for it, and also is able to relax into it.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in here with some of my favourite stuff?
Yes.
So this is from the second book. I think it's chapter 7 in the second book. And so I talk about archetypes of birth, the birth archetypes. And if we think about us as human species and women in the human species, we've been giving birth forever, ever, 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 ever. And really, forever, ever, ever, we've been surrounded by women when we've been giving birth. And they've been our mothers, our grandmothers, or our aunties, or the other women in the village, or so on. So I feel like deep in contemporary women's psyches, there's still a sort of an archetypal form about when they're pregnant, when they're going into birth, what sort of energy they want around them to feel safe. Because this is what's laid down in our collective unconscious, is to have women's energy around us, and women who've given birth before and know what they're doing. Whereas socially and culturally, that's not what is on offer for most women when they're giving birth. But that archetypal form, I think, stirs in the pregnant woman's consciousness, and that she's seeking some of this energy in the people who are around her. But socially and culturally, mostly women are, apart from in small pockets, women are working with strangers in their pregnancy and birth, and the only person they know is their partner, generally the father of the baby. And so often these fathers get, and they're willing, they want to be there. And as you say, Chloe, that, the archetypal form for a father about birth is to be the protector of the space. Yeah? Mm-hmm. That sometimes works out in the birth to be misaligned, and they try and protect the mother from the work of it, i.e. the pain. Yeah? But the projection from the mother at this deep archetypal onto who she knows, her partner, is that he be mother, is that he be able to be grandmother, is that he be sister who knows what to do and exactly how to be in that birth space, because this is what the archetypal yearning is for women, is to have these qualities of energy and knowledge around them for the birth. But socially, who they're encouraged to choose to be the only person that they know at the birth is their partner. And then they're in the hospital mainly, and with people who are not fulfilling any of those roles. So at the home birth, women maybe are more attuned to being able to make those choices. So there still is, I think, that deep yearning to have that woman who knows about birth, who knows the journey, who, when you're feeling a bit lost in a crisis of confidence, that you can look in their eyes and feel like, yes, it's possible, because there's that steadiness in whether it's a midwife, whether it's your best friend or it's your own mother or your grandmother, who trust birth and trust, this is a tricky bit here, or this is that, you've got to go deeper now, or what have you, and they can go into it. So I think I talk about the archetypes, the birthing goddess archetype, the grandmother archetype, the mother archetype, the sister archetype, the birth, I guess we'd say there's a midwife archetype, and then often the father, the mother is putting all of those archetypes into an expectation, deep, unconscious, sometimes fully conscious expectation that the partner can carry all of that. Poor baby. They can't carry it all. And then after the birth, they both can be feeling like they failed one another, which is not great when you've got this new baby and you both need to be at the top of your game with the baby once it's out. So anyway, I love that chapter. I love that stuff. I talk about it a lot in my training. I train women who want to be birth attendants and doulas, and we do a lot about work about that, about what archetype is likely to be projected onto women who are doing this work. Some of them, it's definitely going to be sister energy that will be projected onto them. Some of them, if they're asking me to a birth now, of course, it's grandmother energy. Sometimes maybe even birthing goddess. Who,
I would say birthing goddess.
Yeah.
And
I think it is a really important thing for us to consider, because especially where we are, a lot of the women are relying solely on their partner during the birth, and it is something to really consider, that we don't overwhelm them with needing to look after the kids, needing to clean up afterwards, needing to protect the space for us, and needing to be there as our support person as well. So always something to...
Well, it is, especially because free birth is such a thing, there's a big reclaim in wanting, having a desire to free birth. So you've just got your husband in the room and maybe your kids are somewhere, and you're asking them to make sure there's you're asking them to be aware of what's happening in the room, to see if there's anything potentially a sign or a signal that something's going wrong, look after the kids, get me a drink of water, and then, hold all of it together. Yeah. It's a lot to ask.
They should be up for the challenge. These poor men.
The other archetype for the men, of course, as well as the protector of the space, is, of course, lover. Of course, if the archetype of the lover and the physicality of the lover, then, of course, can really be very juicy for the hormones and for the oxytocin and so But yes, there in that context that you're talking about, then I guess there's also some expectation around, some archetypal expectation about having somebody in that space who knows, who absolutely knows, is this okay, is it not okay? And that I would say is the midwife archetype.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm glad we ironed that out.
I think I should send you my second book.
Please do.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that so you can at least read that chapter 7.
Yeah.
There are a few other things in there that could be useful. Certainly chapter 2, I think, is all about the fucking epidural, so that would be yeah.
Well, Rhea, thank you so much for coming on. We've run out of time looking at the clock, and we could talk to you for ages. But it's really been so awesome to have you here and bring to our attention and our listeners' attention, because I know that we would have quite a few listeners. I mean, of quite a few mothers, but also mothers to be. A small audience there. So thank you so much for bringing this to their attention. It's always good to have the information before you go into the birth space. Definitely something that I did not do. And yeah, where can our listeners find you if they want to find more information?
Oh, yeah. Well, apparently people tell me that they just have to Google my name and they found me now.
Beautiful.
That's when you know you've made it.
Yeah.
Stay around long enough.
Yeah.
Long enough.
You'll be top ranked Google.
Rhea Dempsey, not a very common name, so we should be able to find you. Well, thank you so much again, Rhea, and we will hopefully have you on again.
We might both need a pep talk just going into birth, so we'll chat in 6 months.
When are these babies due?
April.
Okay,
so April to mid-April.
Oh, I say mid to late April.
Well, we can be honest with Rhea.
April babies.
Oh, well, we're telling everybody else May, so they leave us the hell alone.
Exactly. But again, we're so in tune with one another. I mean, this is, in the tribe, the sisters would be ovulating and everything all together.
We must have actually, because our last babies were a couple of weeks apart as well, our fourth babies, but we weren't together. I was in Canada and you were here, but we must have been deeply connected still. I feel like we were talking a lot still, and then now.
Well, they were meant to be 8 weeks apart, and they ended up only being 4 weeks apart because I've got a longer gestation and she's got a shorter one. So we'll see how these ones go.
Oh,
beautiful.
That's so nice.
Beautiful to have your sisters around.
Thank you so much, Rhea.
Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.